This conference will now be recorded.
Yes, good morning. Okay, yesterday we were discussing about what is a polybase, how to do the polybase over here, what we can do, what are the steps we need to follow, all those things. So as a part of this polybase implementation, we were installing the SQL Server on my local machine. I have a SQL Server installed on my local machine. SQL Server on premises means in your local computer, if you are installing the SQL Server, that is called SQL Server on premises. Then if the same SQL services, if you want to set up inside the Azure, instead of in your local machine, all other people are trying to use the service in the SQL Server services inside the Microsoft Azure. What are the different kind of services available? Okay, what are the services available inside the Microsoft Azure? The services related to SQL Server, three ways you can perform. Three different kind of services available inside the Azure. One is Azure SQL database. Another one is Azure SQL managed instance. The next one is Azure SQL in virtual machine. If you want a simple database, I don't want any other features from the SQL Server. If you observe when you are installing the SQL Server, you are getting so many features. Security, server objects, replication, polybase, management, always on high availability, SQL Server agent, integration service, catalog. All these options you are getting when you are installing in your local machine. But really, I don't use all these features. Really, I don't use this one, this one, this one, and this one, this one, and this one. Even the SQL Server agent as well. I just want a simple database to store the data. That's enough. I just need a simple database to creating tables and to store the data. I don't require any features on instance level. What do you mean by instance? This SQL Server you have installed in our local machine, at the time you have given the instance name as e-classes batch 123. In this particular server, you can create as many number of databases. See, I have created 4 databases. But all these databases, the features related to security, server objects, replication, all are common things. Means these features will not get each individual database level. These features you will get at the time you are installing. It's an instance level features. So if you are going with the service available over here, SQL in virtual machine, SQL as a database, then you will not get all these features. When you are going with Azure SQL database, it is just simply creating a database, that's all. That database contains, that server contains only 3 features. One is a database and integration service catalog and security. Only these 3 features you will get: databases, security, integration service catalog. Rest all these features you may not get. All these features are missing over here. Got it? That's called a simple Azure SQL database. Creating a Azure SQL server with a database inside the Microsoft Azure account. When you are going to use a simple application to store the data, the cost also very less comparing to this instance level, because you are not using all these features, so then definitely they are giving less price. That is called Azure SQL database. The next one is a managed instance. Azure SQL managed instance means it's 100%, not 100%, at least 90% of the, it's similar like your Azure SQL database, but you will get all the instance level features. Mostly all these features are available when you are choosing that instance level. That is managed instance. Azure SQL database as a managed instance. You will get most of the features, not 100%, most of the features. When you are coming to the Azure SQL in virtual machine, that is, first you need to create a virtual machine, and inside the virtual machine, if you are installing a SQL server, that is Azure SQL in virtual machine. This is 100% similar like what you are installing in your local machine. When you are installing a software in your local machine, how you are getting all the features, then inside the virtual machine also you are getting all these features. Got it? So based on your requirement, you need to choose which SQL service required inside the Microsoft Azure account. If you want a simple database, go ahead with this. If you want a simple database along with all the features whatever you have inside the instance level, replication, server objects, polybase, always high availability, management, SQL agent, then go ahead with the second one. But one problem over here is when you are choosing these two options, Azure SQL database and Azure SQL managed instance, the version and edition of a SQL server you cannot choose. For example, I need 2012 version. I need evolutionary edition or a developer edition or an enterprise edition. Always when you are choosing this Azure SQL database service and when you are choosing Azure SQL managed instance service, it will take the updated latest version and latest edition by default. By default, it will take latest version and latest edition. But here inside the virtual machine, whichever the version you want, whichever the edition you want, you can install. Okay, whichever the version and whichever the edition you want, you can install over here. Got it? So let's say for example, I have 2012 SQL Server wants to install. Then inside the Azure virtual machine, you can choose which version you want to install. But here it's always default latest version 2019 only. Okay, first what I want to do, I want to demonstrate installing a SQL Server in virtual machine. To install a SQL Server in a virtual machine, do we need to create first virtual machine? And then do we need to install the SQL Server inside the virtual machine? Do we need to perform these two actions separately? No. Microsoft Azure is giving one service, a SQL in virtual machine. That means if you are selecting that service, at a time it will create the virtual machine as well. It will install the SQL Server also. The another method is first take a virtual machine, create a service of creating virtual machine. Already we have seen how to create a virtual machine. How to create a virtual machine already we have demonstrated. And after that you want to install manually, yes you can. Or at the time of creating a virtual machine, that time only I want to do the installation automatically of SQL Server. That service name is SQL in virtual machine. So how to do this demonstration? I'm going to select the service SQL in VM. Go to your Azure account. Try to log into azure.com.
Ram, can we use Polybase in virtual machine in SQL in VM?
Come again.
Can we use Polybase concept in SQL in virtual machine, from virtual machine SQL to Polybase and connecting to the blob?
Yes, that's what I told. This virtual machine, SQL in virtual machine is 100% similar like your SQL in on premises. This will support Polybase. This will support Polybase, but this is not supporting Polybase. Got it?
Thank you.
So I'm going to demonstrate how to install a SQL in virtual machine. Okay, so go to the portal. SQL in virtual machine. See, SQL virtual machines. Select that. Create SQL virtual machine. You need to choose for virtual machine what are the operating system and the images you want. Right, see, there are three options: SQL database, SQL managed instance, SQL in virtual machine. I'm going to choose first this one. So what is the operating system you want to take and the SQL Server version you want? I want to take SQL Server 2019 Enterprise Edition. Windows Server is 2019. Okay, select that, click on create it. So it's a free trial version. Try to create a resource group I'm going to use the existing one, or even if you want, you can create a new one like SQL E classes. This is the virtual. This is the resource group I'm going to create. And what is your virtual machine name you want to give? I want to give VM E classes. In this region, availability options. So images already we have selected. Okay, and the size you can define over here. Click on select size. For your virtual machine, how much operating system, core processors, RAM, disk size, all those things you can specify. Okay, click select. And also 8 GB memory, 2 weak core processors, RAM is 8 GB. And you need to specify the username password to connect to this SQL Server virtual machine. I'm going to make it as a RBF2. This is the password. Okay, so how many ways you want to connect to this is I'm going to use the remote desktop connection. Review and create. If you want to perform anything related to SQL Server settings, so SQL Server connectivity. I want to connect to the SQL Server. It's not from the private network. I want to use the public network. Then only you are able to connect. And the port number is 1433 is the default one. Do you want to enable the SQL authentication to connect to the SQL Server inside the virtual machine? Yes, I want to enable. So what is the username password you want to use to authenticate through the SQL authentication? By using this, or if you want to give any other, yes, I want to use other username password to connect to the SQL Server. That is SA, and this is the password. The specified login name is not allowed. Login names must meet length requirement. Okay, I will make it or SQL AUTH. Password, we can set any password. Okay, Azure key value integration I will discuss later. Okay, so the options what you are enabling, right? If you are not doing at the time of creating these things, later also you can do. Later also we can do. I will show you how to do that one also. Review and create it. Create it. It will take few minutes to create.
Ram, have you selected enterprise version or standard version?
Enterprise.
Okay.
doing step by step over here, deployment of all the VNet and data disks, VMs and SQL inside. It is installing the SQL inside. Deployment is in progress.
Is there any difference between enterprise and standard version of SQL?
Yeah, obviously. So enterprise is fully licensed version and the standard is basically missing some features. So addition to addition, we are losing some features. Okay. So some people want limited features, right? So they no need to pay the amount whatever we are spending for enterprise edition. So let's say for example you are purchasing a car. Okay. So when you are purchasing a car, there are different kind of editions, right? Belino, Delta, Sigma, Alpha. So what is the difference between? So some some edition having fog lights, rear camera, something like this. So if you don't want those features, you can go with the edition whatever don't have these features. So similarly, there are different kind of editions: standard, enterprise, business edition, and developer edition. So we have different editions. Okay, whichever the edition you want with the less price, and check whether the features what you are expecting for your project is available in that or not. If you don't have, then whichever the edition having the features with less price, you can go ahead.
In real time, what version developers does use? Enterprise or standard?
Obviously, they are at the time for developing, they will take the developer edition, and at the time they are going to deploy in the live project, it's an enterprise edition. Because just for developing, they are just giving a less price of the developer edition. So I think it's created the virtual machine VME classes. I think still it is doing installation of the SQL Server. Okay. So meanwhile, you can connect to the virtual machine now. Then meanwhile it will install the SQL Server, or we can wait until the completion of this complete deployment of the SQL VM. Then we can wait. Okay. All right, so it has created. Okay, so go to the resource. So if you want to connect to your virtual machine, see there is a connect option. If you want to restart, if you have any issues about your virtual machine, you can restart, you can stop the service whenever you want. Click on connect through RDP. So try to download this RDP file to connect to this, or you can directly go to your start and remote desktop and give the IP address of this virtual machine. So click on this VM classes.RDP, click connect over here. So the username is this one. Click yes. All right. So your virtual machine is setting up over here, the Windows operating system. Done. This is your virtual machine. So I will verify whether this virtual machine is installed the SQL Server, SQL Server Management Studio, and all those things. Okay. So simply go to start. Then you can go over here. SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio 18. Okay, just double click. when you are going to connect to the SQL Server, there are two ways. One is a Windows authentication. Second one is a SQL authentication. The Windows authentication, you don't need to enter any username password. By default, it will take the username for your virtual machine. Okay. And SQL authentication is you need to enter the username password whatever you have given. I have given SQL AUTH, I think. Yeah, we'll check. And this is the password. Click connect over here. Right? So we have connected through SQL authentication. So now what I want to do, whatever the SQL server you connected here, this SQL server installed in virtual machine, right? The same SQL server in virtual machine, I want to connect from outside. Outside means I have installed a SQL Server Management Studio in my local machine. I'm trying to open the SQL Server Management Studio. Oh, it's already open. This is the one. So through this SQL Server Management Studio, I want to connect to this server. I mean, the SQL Server installed on my virtual machine. I want to establish a connection from this SQL Server Management Studio to this Azure SQL Virtual Machine. What kind of authentication you can use? Definitely you can use only SQL authentication, because if you are using a Windows authentication, the Windows username password in your local machine is different. The Windows username password here it is different. So you cannot enter the Windows username password over here. So you have to use the SQL authentication only. We'll try to connect to this through the SQL authentication. So what is your server name? The server name is your IP address of this virtual machine. 13.92.30.30.13. So where you can take this one, go over here, and yeah, this is the one. Or you can go to overview. There also you can find here this one. Copy this and go over here, connect this one, and take the SQL authentication, SQL AUTH, and password you can click connect. Okay, so this is how you can establish a connection to your from outside. If I'm creating a database over here, that will be reflected over there. So try to create a new database. I'm going to give it as a sample database. Click OK. Okay, go to inside virtual machine and check whether the database is created or not. See, sample database is reflected. So what I was trying to do, I'm trying to connect to the SQL Server installed in a virtual machine through my local machine. So from anywhere you can able to connect to that particular SQL Server if you have a SQL Management Studio and SQL Server in a virtual machine inside the Azure account through SQL authentication. Got it? Okay, so I have enabled two options, right? One is, for example, by default the SQL authentication is not enabled. How to enable a SQL authentication? To enable a SQL authentication inside the virtual machine, go to your Object Explorer and on server, right click, go to properties, so go to security. There you can see if you are not enabling at the time of creating a virtual machine SQL authentication, by default it will come like this, Windows authentication. Okay, you need to enable this SQL authentication, right? Then click OK. Then SQL authentication will be enabled, and then after you need to create a login for the SQL server. Logins, new login, SQL authentication, give the username and set the password. Then you can use that one. And one more option you need to enable is to connect from the public. Then you can go to the networking, and this one, security, now we need to go to the SQL Server Configuration. Go to the resource and go to SQL Server Configuration. Okay, so you just go back and go to the resource groups. Go to your SQL E classes. Here you have a virtual machine and you have a VM classes is your virtual machine. This is your SQL inside the virtual machine. So click on the SQL in virtual machine. There you can go to the configure. Click on security. Yeah, the SQL connectivity, if you remember, it's default private. I made it public, and we are allowing port number 1433 to connect from outside to this virtual machine SQL. Under the SQL, under the security, you need to enable the SQL connectivity. These two options you need to enable over here. Okay, at the time you are creating, if you are enabling already, then there is no issues. Else, no problem. Okay. Any questions on today's session?